Okay, hello, my friends. It is Thursday, March 20th, 2025, and there are three big stories. And the three big stories are really like three big segments. It's a little bit more comprehensive. The first is about what's going on with the negotiated deal and the nuclear plants. What's going on with that? I'll talk about that all as one. And then we'll talk about like Trump and his popularity rating in the U.S. and Republican pushback. That's all another big story. And then we'll talk about like what's going on in Europe and Zelensky in Europe and those connections there. And this is all really, really interesting stuff. Okay, so let's go in and start with this. Trump put this out yesterday, just completed a very good telephone call with Zelensky of Ukraine. It lasted approximately an hour. Much of the discussion was based on the call we made with Putin yesterday and go so on and so forth. I talked about that yesterday. So let's fast forward to then Ambassador Bridget Brink has put out this after today's phone call with President Putin and President Zelensky, or President Trump and President Zelensky. Secretary Rubio and NSA Waltz released the following statement. Well, here's the statement. So we're going to look at it line by line. Well, I mean, the lines that I highlighted from after reading it. Today, President Donald J. Trump and Ukraine's President Volodymyr Zelensky had a fantastic phone conversation. President Trump fully briefed President Zelensky on his conversation with Russian President Vladimir Putin and the key issues discussed. President Zelensky asked for additional air defense systems to protect his civilians. Unfortunately, that's more necessary than ever, given what we just saw this morning, particularly Patriot missile systems. President Trump agreed to work with him and find what was available, particularly in Europe. So again, that's signaling something. The two leaders also agreed on partial ceasefire against energy, that they would do that, but nothing was actually solidified yet. Okay. President Trump also discussed Ukraine's electrical supply and nuclear power plants. He said that the United States could be very helpful in running those plants with its electricity and utility experience. American ownership of those plants would be the best protection for that infrastructure and support Ukrainian energy infrastructure. Now, we're going to talk about this from multiple perspectives, but at first blush, it just kind of looks like, okay, yeah, better in American hands than in Russian hands. Of course, that could give Trump extra leverage over Zelensky, but it's probably no worse leverage than what Putin has over Zelensky with nuclear power plants at this point. But we'll look at it. President Zelensky also thanked President Trump for continuing to push humanitarian concerns, including the exchange of POWs. We saw the images of the POWs being released in the Daily Brief, and they agreed all parties must continue to make efforts to make a ceasefire work. Okay, so that's where we were as of yesterday with the phone call that Trump made to Zelensky made to Trump. Okay, so there's this commentary in Euromaidan Press. After a failed mineral deal, Trump proposes U.S. takeover of Ukrainian nuclear plants. The U.S. now pressures Kyiv to hand over control of nuclear power plants, disguising the takeover attempt as protection from Russian attacks. I'm not sure that that's what's going on. It may be. Again, I just don't know. But the way that they have framed this makes you go, I wonder if there's more to it than that. Here's Anton Gerashenko talking about this. U.S. Energy Secretary Chris Wright said the United States could step in to run Ukrainian power plants if that was helpful to ensure a ceasefire and bring peace. Asked how that would work, Wright told Fox News, quote, "We have immense technical expertise in the United States to run those plants. I don't think that requires boots on the ground." Okay, so here he is talking to Brett Baer in Fox News.
Nuclear power plants in Ukraine, how would that work? And would that require U.S. boots on the ground, or how would that work?
Oh, certainly we have immense technical expertise in the United States to run those plants. I don't think that requires boots on the ground. But I'll leave the foreign policy to President Trump and Secretary Rubio. I know they are working tirelessly. How do we bring peace to Ukraine? How do we get this fighting to stop, which takes both sides to lay down their arms? But if it was helpful to achieve that end, have the U.S. run nuclear power plants in Ukraine, no problem. We can do that.
Okay, so he's saying they have the capability. He's not saying that they're going to, but yeah, we can make it happen. Okay. Now, next issue here. Levitt says that the U.S. could help run Ukraine's power plants. This is Timothy Milovanov. He is the president of the Kyiv School of Economics and former minister of economy, and he seems to have at least a neutral view of this. Maybe it's a little bit better than a neutral view of this. Levitt says that Trump said that the U.S. could help run Ukraine's power plants. He believes American ownership would be the best way to protect Ukraine's energy infrastructure. So he says the translation is the U.S. wants to own Zaporizhzhia nuclear power plant. Otherwise, it might fall into Russian hands. And he goes on and gives some other commentary, but it didn't seem in tone to be terrible. I don't know. I mean, it seems better than the Russians hanging on to it. I'm not sure that I like that. I hope that the deal is not a terrible deal like the original minerals deal was. Again, Anton Gerashenko had one view, and Milovanov has another. And then we have Jake Bro, who says Russia wants Trump to take control of Ukraine's 3 remaining nuclear power plants so Ukraine can never use the waste material, that's plutonium, to make a nuclear weapon. This weird new talking point about Ukraine's nuclear power plant is Russia once again trying to forever disarm Ukraine. I don't know that that's the case. That may be the case. I mean, I wouldn't have seen it the way that Jake saw it because I don't come from that kind. Like he actually spent time in American missile silos as a captain in the Air Force. Okay, so maybe he sees something that I don't see, and that's just fair. Like, listen to other people's perspective, not just mine, because other people will say things that I might miss. That might be what's going on, but it might be harmless. Okay, let's turn to our attention to our second big story. And that is, what's the view of Donald Trump in the United States, and is he getting some pushback? So Trump's poll numbers continue to collapse, according to Jay in Kyiv, now down a stunning minus 12.5% in his first 60 days. So where he started favorably as opposed to unfavorables, the disapproval has risen significantly from about 40 to 48, and down from about 56 to 47 approval rating. Now, this is just one poll. You look at polls as an aggregate, generally speaking. So VoteHub, I don't know anything about VoteHub. Let's say it's a legitimate poll. Okay, he's doing things. Talking about things is different than actually doing things, and that gets people to move one way or another. If we continue to see other polls like this, then we'll be able to say, yep, there's a trend here, there's a trend here, there's a trend here, and one will corroborate another, and we'll be looking for that. Okay. Now, there's also a lot of discussion about how, Trump is a fascist or, he's whatever. Okay. So if you see evidence of that, then you talk about the evidence that you see. Now, there's a dust up between Trump and the courts. And now here on CNN, they're talking about to cross that Rubicon of defying court rulings is a big no-no for Americans. This court ruling is a big loser for Trump. The belief that Trump must follow court orders is more popular than Mother Teresa, 84% of all adults, 92% of Dems, 82% of independents, 79% of the GOP. So here's what they're talking about here can Trump, if a court says, no, you can't do this, can Trump overwhelm that? And if he does go and do something in spite of what the court says anyway, that becomes very problematic and can become a constitutional crisis depending on what happens here. So here's the CNN clip.
The American people do not want Trump to defy court rulings, all right? You rarely see numbers like this. Should Trump follow court rulings? Look at this. 84% of all adults, that's near uniformity in this day and age. You rarely ever see 92% of Democrats, 82% of independents, 79% of Republicans agree on anything. But they do agree on this. They may disagree over Donald Trump, but they all agree that he must follow court rulings. To cross that Rubicon is a big no-no in the eyes of the American public. When the court comes down with a ruling, the American public concurs with each other. That is, Donald Trump must follow those court rulings, even if he doesn't like them.
I mean,
Okay, and so 79% of the GOP, that's the Republican Party, as well as, I mean, so that's not too terribly far. I wish it was higher than that, but that's not. I mean, that's very high. I mean, you don't see almost any item in politics where there's just agreement across the board. But the agreement here is, yeah, the rule of law is the legislature makes the law, the executive executes and carries it out, and the courts decide if it's constitutional or not constitutional. I mean, they're the ones that are the referees arbitrating based on, yes, they legitimately did this, yes, you legitimately carried it out, or you don't have the right to do that, or what have you.
only dogs could get this kind of approval rating. This is incredibly telling.
This and Mother Teresa crosses the Mother Teresa line. She had about an 80% favorable rating when she passed.
Okay, so what do Americans think about whether or not he will defy or not defy a court? Where are they on that?
Yeah, this is where it gets interesting. They all pretty much agree that he should follow court rulings. But when it comes to whether he will follow court rulings, this is where there's big disagreement. Will Trump follow court rulings when the courts rule against him? Look at the majority number here. 58% are not confident that he will, compared to just 42% who are confident that he will. So I think this news that's come out over the past 48 hours, will he, won't he? He, of course, says he will. But the idea that he wouldn't, that finds a home in the American public. That pretty much goes with what they think might very well happen, because 58% of the public is not confident that Trump will, in fact, follow court rulings.
So do Americans think that Trump is overstepping his authority at this point as they watch all of this play out and see some of the things he's been saying?
Yeah, this kind of follows the narrative, right? That's what's so dangerous for Donald Trump on this. You know, I was talking with our dear friend, Mr. Berman, who's over there at the desk before. John Berman, you may have heard of him? Never heard of him? I was talking with him before, and he essentially said, when this becomes a fight over the courts, that all of a sudden is a big issue for Donald Trump. Has Trump exceeded his authority? Again, this follows, right? 57% of Americans already say that he has as president, compared to 40% say no. So again, Donald Trump says he won't defy the court rulings, but the idea that he will follows along with the American public, because they already think he has exceeded his authority as president.
Now, if you look at those numbers, I recognize that much of my audience is not American. So about a third of the country is Democrat, about a third of the country is independent, about a third of the country is Republican. So if you look at that, this makes sense of what's going on. The Democrats and much of the independents are saying, yes, he might do this, and the Republicans are probably saying, no, he won't. That's my guess. So if you saw this broken out, it might be very differently. You might see this differently.
Thank you so much, Harry Enton.
So here, let's go back to this. Who's confident that he will? I would guess that it would, if you broke this out by party, you'd see that Republicans are confident that he will follow the orders, and the Democrats and independents are not confident that he will. So that's probably what's going on there. They didn't break it out. That's just my speculation, but I think that's probably what is going on. Now, there's also some Republican backlash now. This is Senator Murkowski. She's from Alaska. She's a United States senator sent from Alaska, but she went back to her home state, and she's talking to a joint legislative session in her home state. And this is what she had to say.
Quite honestly, I've been stunned by a turn of events that would appear that we might abandon Ukraine and collapse longstanding alliances from NATO to NORAD. And then we've got two close neighbors here in Alaska. We got Russia over here, we've got Canada over here. How we came to a place where we're fighting now with Canada and we're making nice with Russia, it's beyond me. And as long as we've got to send up fighter jets to chase off Russian bear bombers from our addies, I'm not going to trust Putin here, and I'm not going to be quiet about it. I'm going to stand up and say so.
Now, I don't know what the legislature makeup is in Alaska. I know that the Alaskan state of Alaska tends to tilt conservatively, and she's getting reasonably polite applause, but I can't tell who's who.
Thank you.
Okay, so that's Murkowski. And then you also saw this. Wow, the GOP chairs of the Senate and the House Armed Services Committees issued a joint statement in response to the below story indicating that the Trump Department of Defense wants to significantly restructure the combatant commands. They said this, and this is Chairman Wicker and Chairman Rogers in a joint statement, and they're both conservatives, or they're both Republican conservatives. We will not accept significant changes to our warfighting structure that are made without a rigorous interagency process, coordination with combatant commanders and the Joint Staff, and collaboration with Congress. Such moves risk undermining American deterrence around the globe and detracting from our negotiating positions with America's adversaries. So, yeah, they are standing up. Not enough. There should be more, but that's what's going on. Okay, so let's look at what's going on around the world here. Meloni. This is going to be really interesting. It will help reveal Putin's possible bluff, says Italian Prime Minister Giorgia Meloni. She insists on extending Article 5 of the NATO treaty to Ukraine. That's really interesting. I have taken a clear position on both the ineffective proposals of other countries and the proposals put forward by Italy, namely the extension of NATO Article 5 to Ukraine. This seems to be the simplest and most effective proposal of all, also because it will help to reveal Putin's possible bluff. If Russia has no plans to invade neighboring countries again, then it is unclear why it should not accept the security guarantees that are purely defensive. Good point. This proposal should be put on the negotiating table. Peace is based on security guarantees. We must not blindly follow proposals put forward by others just because we need to decide where we stand. Our role is to participate in our own proposals. Those who have the courage to put them forward are doing something useful, says Meloni. Okay. I think that's a good stance. Now, there was huge protests in Serbia. Now, Milos Vucevic, the prime minister of Serbia, has resigned together with his government. President of Serbia, Vucic, has said that he may announce new elections in early June, just a year and a half from the previous elections in Serbia. Okay, there's a sign that if someone or something makes Medvedev mad, they are really playing against Russia and making Ukraine stronger. So he's talking smack about future Chancellor Merz, accusing Russia of waging war in Europe and targeting Germany with arson, contract killings, and disinformation. You're not in power yet, but you're already lying like Goebbels. Goebbels was the propaganda minister I actually read Goebbels' diaries during my thesis study in my public policy degree. So you're already acting like Goebbels. Nazi Germany attacked us like this from 1941 to 1945. We know how it ended. Bad start, Fritz. Okay, but Medvedev, who lies regularly, is calling him Goebbels? I mean, it's okay. Anyway, and then we have this. President Zelensky arrived from Norway for an official visit after his trip to Finland, so that's where he is. And while he's in the middle of a conference, Macron unexpectedly calls Zelensky while he's speaking. When just asked to confirm whether it was the French president, Zelensky replied, "Yes, I just spoke with President Macron. We talk very often, one day on average, every day on average." So,
тільки що розмовляв з президентом Макроном, з Еммануелем.
Yeah, he was just confirming that he was on the phone. He's talking in a conference. Hold on.
Конкретного кейсу, будь ласка.
Sorry, Emmanuel. I have just conversation with the journalist. Can I be back in some minutes, in 15-20 minutes? Yeah, please. Thank you, Emmanuel.
Yeah, he picked up a call from Macron. He's not going to not pick that phone call up. And he's like, yeah, I'll call you back. All right, that's all that I have, my friends. Thank you for your time. Thank you for the likes, the shares, the subscribes, and thank you for being the kind of person that cares about Ukraine.